Welcome back to the Battlefield Brief. My name is Craig, and I am glad you tuned in today. Let's take a look at what happened across the competitive Warhammer 40,000 scene this week. We're breaking down the latest tournament results, faction win rates, player numbers, and the armies shaping the current meta. Using tournament data from Best Coast pairings, the Battlefield Brief is an application that grabs the information as soon as the last tournament closes and generates the following reports to help turn the weekly numbers into useful insights that we can review Monday morning and that you can use in planning for your next event. Let's start with the big picture and look at how every faction performed this week. This chart shows the current win rates across the field, with the 45 to 55% balance zone highlighted in the middle. It gives us a quick way to see which armies are overperforming, which are struggling, and how much of the meta is sitting in a healthy competitive range. This week's meta looks to be mostly balanced, with 19 factions inside the target range. Leagues of Votann are overperforming this week at 57.0% across 45 players, placing them 2.0 percentage points above the target range. Chaos Demons moved up 6.4% from the previous week's results and finished just above the top end of the balance zone at 56.4%. Orcs and Custodes both sit just above 55%, and at the bottom of the chart, the Imperial Guard are moving up and have found better success this week compared to the last few weeks. Chaos Knights continue to slip and are below 45% this week, along with Eldari, Death Guard, Agents, and Black Templars. Next, let's compare this week's results with each faction's 4-week average. Green bars show factions performing above their recent baseline, while red bars show factions that slip below it. This helps us separate a meaningful change in form from a faction simply continuing its usual level of performance. Leagues of Votann moved up 4 points from their 4-week average. This is an unexpected move for them from my perspective, and is an 8-point move up from last week's numbers. Chaos Demons moved up 4.3 percentage points to 56.4% from their 4-week average. I knew they were strong, but this is a big move for them as well. Orcs, Necrons, and Thousand Sons all are losing their foothold as strong dominant factions, and Blood Angels and Imperial Guard both move up into the target balance zone this week. Now, let's look at which factions are turning their tournament entries into top finishes. This chart combines undefeated and one-loss lists by faction, giving us a clearer picture of which armies are consistently converting representation into strong competitive results. It helps separate factions that are simply popular from the ones repeatedly reaching the top tables. The weekend produced 156 undefeated lists across the available tournament list data. Behind the undefeated field, 618 one-loss lists also posted strong tournament records. Space Marines delivered 18 undefeated lists and 62 one-loss lists from 80 total entries. And Orcs have the most undefeated lists this week at 21 lists, with 53 one-loss lists. Now, let's shift from factions to playstyle and see how the field is approaching the game. This breakdown shows how tournament lists are distributed across the 5 dispositions, helping us identify which strategies are shaping the meta and which ones remain less common. Purge the Foe was used by 199 lists, representing 25.7% of the undefeated and one-loss lists, posting an 82.1% win rate. Taken Hold was used by 188 lists, representing 24.3% of the undefeated and one-loss lists, posting an 84.2% win rate. Priority Assets was used by 163 lists, representing 21.1% of the undefeated and one-loss lists, and posting an 83.8% win rate. Reconnaissance was used by 114 lists, representing 14.7% of the undefeated and one-loss lists, and posting an 85.8% win rate. Disruption is bringing up the rear at 14.2% and was used by 110 undefeated and one-loss lists. Now, let's shift from performance to popularity and see what people are playing. These are the most represented factions in the current tournament field, which gives us a useful look at the armies shaping pairings, practice plans, and the matchups you should be preparing for. Necrons were the most played faction this week, with 78 players accounting for 6.9% of the field. This beats out Space Marines, and that is an impressive thing for a Xenos faction to do. Space Marines, Orcs, Custodes, and Imperial Knights are all strong player representation with more than 60 players this week. Next, let's look at where the biggest competitive gatherings happened this week. This chart ranks the largest events by attendance, giving us a clear view of which tournaments contributed the most players and carried the greatest weight in this week's meta picture. The biggest event is the Lone Star Open 2026, Warhammer 40K Champs, which drew 336 players and ranked number 1 by attendance. Everything is bigger in Texas. We will look at the Lone Star winner in a minute. Another big event was Krefeld Major 40K 2026, which drew 138 players and ranked number 2 by attendance. And the largest number of games comes from the Salt City GT Grand Tournament with 100 players. They had a 7-round tournament this weekend. For this week's event spotlight, the Lone Star Open brought together 336 players, making it the largest event in the field by a wide margin. Carter Krause took the top spot with a 5-0 run, piloting leagues of Votann in the Armored Trailblazers detachment with the Disruption disposition. That is a strong result from one of the biggest competitive stages of the week. Congratulations to Carter Krause. That brings us to the end of this week's Battlefield Brief. Keep these trends in mind as you build your list, plan your practice games, and prepare for your next event. Let me know in the comments what you're playing and which part of the meta you want us to cover next. Subscribe for next week's tournament report, and until then, good luck at the tables.